Friends, how are you? Hope you are doing well. So let us start our next topic called developing an ESG policy. How to develop the environmental social governance policy. So let us move forward to develop the ESG policy, which involves several steps to ensure that it aligns with the organizational values, goals, stakeholder expectations. So there is some suggested framework for developing an ESG policy, and the components of this are like commitment and leadership, stakeholder engagement, materiality assessment, the policy development team, research and benchmarking, drafting the policy, internal review and feedback, legal and compliance review, approval and endorsements, and communication and training. Then implementation plan for the policy, monitoring and reporting mechanism, and last but not the least, the continuous improvement. So let us discuss one by one each and every component here. So commitment and leadership. This is about securing the commitment and support from the senior leadership and the key stakeholders for developing and implementing the ESG policy. So to develop the ESG policy, the commitment and leadership which we need to have from the higher authorities. The next is stakeholder engagement, where we talk about identification and prioritization and the engagement with relevant internal and external stakeholders to understand their ESG related priorities. Okay, so basically these priorities comes from the identified materiality topics, which will be based on the feedback of the stakeholder engagement. So the priorities, the concern areas, and the expectations of the stakeholders. Okay, next is the materiality assessment. This is a very important step and very important concept. Like to conduct a materiality assessment, we need to identify, prioritize the most significant issues, ESG issues, which are relevant to the organizational operations, industry, and the stakeholder. Next is about policy development team. So we need to have a cross-functional team which we need to establish, and that will be responsible for developing the ESG policy, including representatives from the relevant departments. For an example, sustainability team, the compliance team, the legal team, the human resource team. Next is about research and benchmarking. In the research and benchmarking component, we need to conduct the research and do the benchmarking to understand industrial best practices, the industry best practices by conducting the benchmarking, and regulatory requirements and emerging trends in ESG reporting and disclosure. Next comes drafting the policy. So to develop a draft of the ESG policy document, which will be outlining the organizational commitment to ESG principles, objectives, and strategies, this policy also should address the key components such as environmental stewardship, social responsibility or corporate social responsibility, and sound governance practices, sound or strong governance practices. Then next comes about the internal review and feedback. So to have the internal review, circulate the draft ESG policy internally for review and feedback from employees, managers, and other relevant stakeholders, and incorporate that feedback to refine the policy as needed. Refine the draft ESG policy. Okay, refine it. How you will refine it? By having the internal review and the feedback mechanism. The next comes the legal and the compliance review. So to have this, conduct a legal and compliance review of the draft ESG policy to ensure alignment with the local relevant laws, regulations, and the industrial standards. Then international standards as well, of course. And we talk about next approval and endorsement. So to obtain approval and endorsement of the final ESG policy, we need to go to the senior leadership or the board of directors or highest governance body and take the approval or the endorsement of the ESG policy. Then next step is communication and training. So communicate the ESG policy to all employees, stakeholders, business partners through internal communication channels, training sessions, or awareness campaigns. and as per the training or communication protocols. The next comes the implementation plan. Implementation plan is about developing a detailed implementation plan which will be outlining specific actions, targets, and the important subject timelines, okay, for integrating the ESG policy into the business operations and decision making processes. Next is how to monitor and report we need to have the reporting mechanism, how to report the performance of implementation of the ESG policy. So we need to establish mechanisms for monitoring and reporting on ESG performance, progress towards the goals, and compliance with the ESG policy. And this may include regular reporting to the senior management, the board of directors, investors, and other stakeholders also. And finally, we talk about the continuous improvement. To have a culture of continuous improvement, to foster the culture of continuous improvement, how we can do that? So by regularly reviewing and updating the ESG policy based on the feedback, performance data, and evolving stakeholder expectations. Okay, so we can have the continuous improvement by following these steps what I explained here. Organizations can develop a robust ESG policy that reflects their commitment to sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and ethical governance, responsible business conduct, and driving positive impact and value creations to all the stakeholders. So this is how we complete our topic of developing the ESG policy. Thank you very much, friends. Let us have the next topic discussion.